Before we begin, comment where you're watching from and what the weather is like there right now. Because today's story is about how people survived brutal winters centuries ago without electricity. Imagine freezing temperatures, biting winds, and no central heating to turn on. So how did they do it? The heart of the medieval home was the open hearth, a fire pit right in the middle of the main room. It provided heat, light, and a place to cook, but it was smoky. That's why many homes had a hole in the roof to let the smoke out. They also used heavy tapestries on stone walls. These weren't just for decoration. They were a brilliant form of insulation, trapping heat and blocking drafts. And of course, everyone huddled together, sharing body warmth. It was a combination of clever design and community that got them through the cold. Fascinating, right? Follow for more forgotten secrets from history. Ever wonder how people survived winters hundreds of years ago? I mean, really survived. We're talking about a time before electricity, before central heating, before you could just tap your phone and make your house toasty warm. Today, we get a little shiver and we crank up the thermostat. But imagine living in medieval Europe. Winters were not just cold. They were often brutally long and unforgiving, part of a period some climate historians even call the Little Ice Age. So how did they do it? How did families in drafty stone castles or humble wooden cottages not freeze to death? It's easy to picture medieval life through a romantic lens. Grand feasts in majestic halls, knights in shining armor. But the reality for most, from the richest lord to the poorest peasant, was a constant battle against the cold. Their homes were fundamentally different from ours. Forget insulated walls and double-glazed windows. We're talking about structures built primarily from stone, timber, and wattle daub, which is basically a mix of mud, straw, and sticks. These materials are not exactly known for their amazing heat retention properties. Let's start at the top, with the castles. You see them in movies, looking all grand and imposing. But living in one during January, it was like living inside a giant, very fancy refrigerator. The massive stone walls that were so great for defense were terrible at holding heat. They absorbed the cold and radiated it inwards. Windows were often just narrow slits, called arrow loops, designed for archers. Even larger windows, in more residential areas of the castle, were rarely glazed with glass. Glass was incredibly expensive, a luxury reserved for the wealthiest nobles and churches. Most people made do with oiled linen or paper, or even just wooden shutters, which plunged the room into darkness when closed, but were essential for blocking the wind. The drafts were relentless. Cold air would whistle through every crack and crevice, under doors, and around those shuttered windows. It was a constant, bone-chilling presence. Now, what about the common folk? The vast majority of people lived in much simpler dwellings. Think small, one or two-room cottages, often built with a timber frame and walls made of wattle and daub. The roofs were typically thatched with straw or reeds. While these materials might sound a bit cozier than stone, they had their own problems. They were prone to dampness, rot, and, of course, drafts. The floor was often just packed earth. Can you imagine waking up and putting your bare feet on a freezing dirt floor? There was no concept of insulation as we know it today. The main goal was simply to keep the wind and the rain out, and even that was a challenge. For everyone, regardless of social status, the day was dictated by the sun. Once darkness fell, the cold truly set in. Activities would move closer to the only source of heat available, which was, of course, fire. But even that wasn't as simple as it sounds. Managing a fire in these homes was a smoky, dangerous, and often inefficient business. So, the fundamental problem was this. You're living in a structure that actively works against you, in a climate that's trying to freeze you with no modern technology to help. Your very survival depended on ancient, ingenious, and sometimes desperate methods to generate and trap every precious bit of warmth. How they managed this is a story of incredible human resilience and cleverness, and it reveals some heating secrets that are surprisingly relevant even today. Coming up, we'll dive into the heart of the medieval home, the hearth, and discover how this single feature was the center of their universe. Stay with us. Imagine it's the dead of winter. A bitter wind howls outside. Snow is piling up against the door, and the temperature has plunged well below freezing. You're bundled up on your couch, maybe with a hot drink. And if you start to feel a chill, you just nudge the thermostat up a degree or two. The furnace kicks in, and warm air floods your home. It's simple, it's instant, and we take it completely for granted. But now, let's rewind the clock. Way back. Not just before smart thermostats, but before electricity itself. Welcome to the Middle Ages. The winters were just as cold, if not colder. The famous Little Ice Age brought some brutally harsh conditions to Europe. So how on earth did people survive inside their homes? How did they keep from freezing to death when the sun went down? If you're picturing a cozy scene with a roaring fire and a grand stone fireplace, you're on the right track, but that's only a tiny piece of a much more complex and fascinating puzzle. The reality of staying warm was a constant, daily struggle that shaped every aspect of medieval life. From how they built their houses, to what they wore, to how they even slept. The truth is, their methods were so ingenious that in some ways, they were more effective than our modern central heating. So, let's start with the biggest challenge, the medieval house itself. Whether you were a peasant living in a small, timber-framed cottage, or a lord in a stone castle, your home was designed to fight the cold. But it was a leaky, drafty battle. There was no such thing as double-glazed windows. In fact, for many, glass was an unaffordable luxury. Windows were often just small openings covered with wooden shutters, or perhaps oiled paper or cloth that let in a little light, but also a lot of cold air. And the walls. Forget insulation. A peasantess home was typically made of wattle and daub. Basically a wooden lattice plastered with a mix of wet soil, clay, sand, and straw. While that sounds primitive, it was actually a pretty decent insulator. But stone castles, they were a nightmare. Those thick stone walls were fantastic for defense, but they were also giant cold sinks. They absorbed the chill from the outside and radiated it inwards, making the interior feel like a refrigerator. This brings us to the most iconic feature of medieval heating, the open fire. In early medieval homes, there wasn't even a proper fireplace with a chimney. Instead, they had a central hearth right in the middle of the main room. It was essentially a stone-lined pit where the fire burned day and night. The smoke, well, it just drifted upwards and hopefully found its way out through a small hole in the thatched roof. You can imagine the air quality. It was smoky, sooty, and a constant fire hazard. That lovely thatched roof could go up in flames in an instant. So why wasn't a big, roaring fire the perfect solution? Well, for one, fuel was precious. Chopping and hauling wood was hard, back-breaking labor. You couldn't just burn it carelessly. More importantly, an open fire is incredibly inefficient at heating a room. Most of the heat goes straight up with the smoke. You'd be warm if you were huddled right next to it, but step a few feet away, and you'd feel the biting cold again. The fire created a small bubble of warmth in a sea of icy air. And this is where the real genius of medieval survival kicks in. They knew the fire alone wasn't enough. They had to be smarter. They had to use every trick in the book to trap and preserve every last bit of precious warmth. Their entire daily life was a masterclass in thermal efficiency. And it starts with the most basic human need, sleep. Ever wonder how people in medieval times survived those harsh, freezing winters without electricity, central heating, or any of the comforts we take for granted? It's easy to imagine them shivering constantly in dark, drafty castles. But the truth is, they had some incredibly clever heating tricks up their sleeves. So smart that even our modern homes can't always compete. It wasn't about high-tech gadgets. It was all about brilliant design. Let us start with the most obvious feature of any castle or medieval stone house: those incredibly thick walls. You might think they were just for defense, but they served a much cozier purpose. These walls acted like giant, natural batteries for heat. This is a concept called thermal mass. During the day, The stones would slowly absorb heat from the sun and from the indoor fires. Then, as the sun went down and the air grew colder, the walls would gradually release that stored warmth back into the rooms, keeping the temperature stable and comfortable throughout the night. It was a slow, steady, and completely passive form of heating. Our modern homes with their thin drywall can't do that. They lose heat almost as fast as the furnace can produce it. Then there was the simple genius of window placement. Medieval builders were amateur astronomers in their own right. They understood the path of the sun. They would strategically place the largest windows on the south-facing side of the house. In the winter, the sun is low in the sky, so its rays would shine directly through these windows, flooding the rooms with natural light and, more importantly, warmth. It was a primitive form of solar heating. In the summer, when the sun is high overhead, the angle of the sunlight would be much steeper, so less direct heat would enter, helping to keep the house cool. It's a beautifully simple principle we're only now rediscovering with passive solar design in modern eco-homes. But the real heart of the medieval home, both literally and figuratively, was the central hearth. Unlike the fireplaces we have today, which are usually pushed against an outer wall, medieval hearths were often placed right in the middle of the main living area. This was a game changer for efficiency. When a fire is in the center of a room, its heat radiates outwards in all directions, warming the entire space much more evenly. A fireplace on an outside wall loses a huge amount of its heat directly through that wall to the cold outdoors. The central hearth, however, shared all of its warmth with the people inside. Smoke would either exit through a simple hole in the roof, called a smoke hole, or later, through a chimney hood that funneled it upwards. This central placement meant that the fire wasn't just for cooking. It was the home's engine of warmth, a communal gathering point where the entire household could benefit from its glow. So, when you picture a medieval home, don't just see cold stone and flickering candlelight. See a cleverly designed system. A home that stored the sun's energy in its walls, welcomed its warmth through its windows, and centered its life around an efficient, heat-radiating hearth. They didn't have our technology, but they had a deep understanding of their environment and how to work with it, not against it. It's a lesson in sustainable design that is just as relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago. In the next part, we'll look at the fabrics and furnishings they used to trap that precious heat. Now, let's talk about modern homes. Why do so many of them seem to lose heat so quickly compared to their medieval counterparts? It's a paradox, isn't it? We have all this incredible technology, central heating, insulation, double-glazed windows, yet our energy bills are sky high, and we're constantly battling drafts. The answer lies in a fundamental shift in design philosophy. Modern construction often prioritizes speed, cost-effectiveness, and aesthetics over thermal efficiency. We build with lightweight materials like drywall and wood frames, which are fantastic for quick construction but have very low thermal mass. They don't absorb and radiate heat like stone or daub walls do. So, when you turn your heating off, the air cools down rapidly, and the walls don't have that stored warmth to release back into the room. Another big factor is air leakage. Modern homes, despite our best efforts with weather stripping and seals, are often surprisingly drafty. We have more windows, more doors, vents for appliances, and complex rooflines, all potential points for precious warm air to escape. Medieval builders, by contrast, built for survival. A home had to hold heat. They had fewer and smaller openings. Windows were often just wooden shutters, which, when closed, were surprisingly effective at stopping drafts. The very construction of a wattle and daub wall, with its dense mixture of clay, sand, and straw, created a relatively airtight barrier. And what about our heating systems? Central heating is convenient, no doubt, but it often creates an uneven distribution of heat. Hot air raises, so you get warm ceilings and cold floors. It also creates a dry, stuffy atmosphere. The radiant heat from a central hearth was different. It warmed objects, the floors, the furniture, the people directly. This creates a much more comfortable and pervasive feeling of warmth, one that lingers long after the fires died down. The modern equivalent would be underfloor heating, which mimics this effect and is known for its comfort and efficiency, but it's an expensive luxury for most. So, what have we lost? In our quest for convenience and modernity, we've forgotten some basic principles of passive heating. We've become reliant on active, energy-intensive systems to correct for design flaws. A medieval peasant might have been cold by our standards, but their home was a smartly designed system for capturing and retaining every precious bit of warmth. It was a shelter that worked with nature, not against it. We often think of the past as primitive, but when it comes to staying warm, those medieval builders had a few secrets that we could learn from today. We're rediscovering the importance of thermal mass, airtightness, and passive solar design ideas that were intuitive to our ancestors. It just goes to show that sometimes the most intelligent solutions aren't the most technologically advanced. They're the ones that have been time-tested for centuries. Thanks for joining me on this journey back in time. It's fascinating to see how the challenges of daily life spurred such ingenious solutions. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the past. See you next time.